yourself muted, that would be good. And then you can just always unmute yourself or type in the chat box if you have any questions. So this is our Totally Tomatoes webinar. My name is Ashley Amos. I am one of the planning coordinators with the West Virginia Department of Ag. I'm located in Nicholas County, and I cover the whole southeastern part of the state. So on this planning coordinator map, I'm the purple. And we also have 3 other planning coordinators around the state. And then if you are not in one of their highlighted areas, we cover those as well. So some of the things that we do is we help with the sorry guys, the recording. Does it say it's recording on your end, Kacey?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. We'll go with it. Okay, so planning coordinators, I'm one of them, and we can help ag businesses with selling or helping with business plans. We'll help you with production plans or helping navigate any of the rules and regulations, and also help with things like finding markets. One of the other programs that's housed in the Business Development Division is our West Virginia Grown program. So it is our free branding program for producers around the state. And as a member, you can use the logo for branding on displays or your labels and even on products like meat. And then some of the other bonuses include your information on our website and in the market bulletin and the West Virginia Grown directory. Which there's an example of that right there. And then another program that's housed in the Business Development Division is our Veterans and Heroes to Ag program. It supports our veterans and heroes getting into ag through education, scholarships, mentorship opportunities, marketing, technical and business development support, and things like that. And so next I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Zach Perry. He is our horticulturist, and he will be giving our presentation today.
All right, thanks, Ashley. Let's see if I can get this to work again. All right. So can you see my screen?
Yep, we're good.
All right. I am going to be talking about tomatoes tonight. I just did like a brief overview of, cultural management, pests, variety selection. Yeah, so a summary of tomatoes. So tomatoes are native to the tropics where they grow perennially. In our state, they're grown annually. They belong to the nightshade family. And so this is a really economically important family of plants that also includes white and red potatoes, peppers, and eggplants. They're one of the most popular crops among home gardeners in West Virginia. Relatively easy to grow. They have a high volume of fruit produced per space taken by plants. So with one plant, you can get several pounds of fruit. High value flavor and quality when picked fresh from the vine. So nothing better than walking through the backyard and getting a really fresh, ripe tomato. So soil requirements. Tomatoes do best in well-drained soil. They don't like wet feet. In a site that receives full partial sun best. pH should be between 6.2 and 6.8. Tomatoes tolerate a slightly acidic soil pretty well. Hydroponically, they're grown fairly acidic compared to other plants. The addition of excess nitrogen to tomatoes You know, initially when the plants are small, a boost of nitrogen is good, but if you keep dosing them with a high nitrogen fertilizer, it'll make them become really vegetative. These plants have large, vigorous leaves and very few fruit. So if you may have grown tomatoes that are really tall and big and bushy and look beautiful, but they don't have a single fruit on them. It's just too much nitrogen. To make sure you're getting the right nutrients for your test, you need to always perform a soil test every year. It's free. Just take your sample and send it off to the WVU soil testing lab. Included a link here. You can just Google WVU soil testing lab to get the form, and it'll tell you exactly what's in your soil and how to get it back to optimum. So soil health and conditions are important for all vegetable crops. So talking about tomatoes today, but soil testing helps all your crops. Variety selection. So there are hundreds of varieties of tomatoes on the market, including different shapes, colors, taste profiles, days of maturity, plant size. Because of the number of varieties available, some considerations into what the goal of your tomato crop is. Do you want a determinate versus an indeterminate? How will tomatoes be used? What's the disease resistance packages? Are you growing heirlooms because you like the flavor? Are you trying to sell? There's lots of considerations for varieties. So I wanted to talk about this. People hear this term all the time, and I like this graphic to describe it, but there are two major categories of tomatoes, so determinates and indeterminates. Determinate varieties, sometimes colloquially known as bush varieties, grow to a certain height and stop growing. The harvest window for the fruit is typically 4 to 8 weeks. And you can see a determinate on the left. It's grown to a certain height and put off all its fruit around the same time. Whereas indeterminate varieties will continue to grow vertically and produce fruit along the entire season, generally until killed by weather conditions. So indeterminate, you can see how big and tall these guys get, and they just keep producing fruit sequentially up the plant. Whereas a determinate plant's going to grow to a certain height and put off all of its fruit in a fairly short harvest window. So with there being so many varieties available, this is kind of just the top 10 or so that I picked that I really like, but there are countless more. So if you don't see one on here that you've heard of or grown, don't feel offended. So I work a lot with high tonal producers. So I put two high tonal suitable varieties on here. BHN 589. It's a red semi-determinate. So we talked about indeterminate and determinate. These guys are semi-determinate. They grow a little bigger than determinate tomatoes, and they set fruit for a little longer. 8 to 10 ounce fruit. They're 75 days, very well suited for high tonal production. And then the counterpart to that is BHN 871, which is the same thing, but an orange or yellow tomato. There is Primo Red. It's an early maturing 8 to 16 ounce red fruit on a compact determinate plant, 68 days. Celebrity Red, half ounce fruit, determinate, high yield, and disease resistance, 72 days. Rocky Top, half ounce fruit on a bushy determinate plants with good uniformity and well suited for high tonal production. Lemon Boy, yellow, indeterminate, 7 ounce fruit, 72 days. Mountain Fresh Plus, this is another high tunnel favorite around here. Red determinate, half to 1 pound fruit, 75 days. And then for a cherry, I picked Super Sweet 100. They're all the cherries are indeterminate that I know of. I think you might be able to get bush ones. They're mostly indeterminate, but the small cherry fruit 60 days to maturity. Here's some pictures of all those different guys. and you'll have access to this PowerPoint afterwards if you want to go back and it's kind of hard for me reading off a chart and then looking at the picture, but here you go. While talking about seeds and varieties, I'm a big advocate for starting your own seeds if you have the means to do so. Just what's available to you as a seed compared to what you can get as a transplant is way more diverse. So you might be able to get that really interesting heirloom or that really new high disease resistant tomato that you couldn't just go to the store to get. But I just want to talk a little bit about transplant production. So tomato seeds take between 6 and 8 weeks to become healthy, vigorous transplants ready to be planted out in the garden. So to determine when to plant your seeds, you need to look at the calendar and find your planting date. So that's going to be the last date of frost. Subtract 8 weeks, and this will give you the date when you should sow your seeds. Tomatoes do well in 48 count or larger 10-20 tray liners. So the standard liner, the standard flat, if you will, with 48 count or larger self-pack trays, or even in 4-inch individual pots. Tomatoes do really well in those for transplants. You want to provide dilute fertilizer every 2 weeks once the first true leaves emerge. So acclimating seedlings, newly purchased transplants, as well as those grown indoors or otherwise from seed, must first be acclimated to the harsh conditions of the garden. So to do this, you're going to place the plants outside for a few hours each day. First 2 to 3 days, place in an area with little or filtered sun. Gradually move to an area with full sun. When you're doing this, you want to make sure if the nighttime temp is below 60 to bring them inside. This process should take 10 to 14 days and result in resilient plants ready for transplanting. So when you're transplanting, you don't want to plant in the garden until all danger of frost has passed. This is based on your growing zone. You can also get a soil probe and check your soil temperatures. It should be at least 60 before planting your tomatoes. The spacing of the plants depends on the type of plant. Is it a determinate? Is it a bush? Is it a small tomato? Is it going to be a 10-foot indeterminate tomato? Is it going to be staked or caged, or is it going to be, grown on the ground or newspaper? So staked or caged plants, 1.5 to 2 feet between plants in row and 5-foot spacing between the rows. Unstaked determinate plants, 12 to 24 inches in row spacing and 4 to 6 foot row spacing. Unstaked indeterminate plants, 24 to 36 inch in row spacing and 5 to 6 foot row spacing. At the time of transplanting, make sure you irrigate each seedling with a little bit of fertilizer just to reduce the transplant shock. There are several methods for trellising. This kind of illustrates all the major ones. You can see here in the middle your traditional stake. So when binding a tomato plant to a stake, you never want to do it very tight. You want to leave a little bit of room because that stem is just going to grow outward, and if it's too tight, it'll cut off the circulation there and it'll usually die. There's a variety of cages on here. It doesn't really show the classic conical cages that we get around here, but they're all the same thing. You just put it around the plant and it grows through it for support. I did include over here on the left a graphic of, it's called the Florida weave, sometimes called the Georgia weave, but you put T-posts every 6 feet or so down the row, and you're going to take twine, tie it to the T-post, and weave it in and out of the plants, wrapping it around the T-post, in and out of the plants, and wrapping it around the T-post, and tying it off, and just continue this method up the plant. It's how they grow and trellis their tomatoes in the South. I've tried it, not ever had a lot of success, but some people I know really like it. I just thought I would talk about it for a second. So controlling growth. So in West Virginia, we always refer to this guy as a sucker. So the small stem that grows between the leaf and the stem, it's a sucker. It's also known as an axillary shoot, but I like this graphic because it actually called it a sucker, and it saves me a little bit of explaining. Um, with indeterminates, if you take all the suckers, you're going to end up with a really long, tall plant. You can selectively leave suckers to make it a little bit bushier if you want, or you can take the suckers to, allow for airflow. I just like this graphic because it really shows you where it comes from, and it has the correct term. So yeah, you're going to use this to balance the plant too. You can take leaves, you can take suckers, and that's going to help control the vegetativeness if it gets too aggressive on you. And likewise, if it gets too generative, it's really lanky and thin. You can take some of the clusters, well, not the clusters, but some of the fruit from the clusters to help balance the plant out. So tomatoes also excel in containers. For urban settings where space is limited, tomatoes can be planted in containers. The larger the container, the better. Generally, 4 to 5 gallons per mature tomato plant. It's critical to have sufficient drainage when growing in containers. If you don't have holes in it, make sure to have, gravel or something at the bottom. Be sure to use a potting mix, not garden soil. If you use soil from your garden, it's going to get really dry and clumpy. It doesn't have enough uh, material that keeps the drainage going. Generally, a staker cage is used in conjunction with containers. So they have a cage on this one. So some tomato disorders. Several physiologic disorders manifest in tomatoes during times of high heat. So end of July and August are generally when you're going to start to see some of these things. So not even, so maybe July and August. Temperatures above 90 degrees Fahrenheit have adverse effects on the physiologic processes of tomatoes, resulting in disorders. Um, Pollen viability is greatly decreased during times of high heat, leading to uneven or less fruit set, causing flowers to abort on the plant itself. You can see this picture over here. This flower just got zapped. It was way too hot. Sun scald, I don't think I have a picture of that on here, but it occurs when the fruit receives too much direct sunlight due to lack of foliage or leaves covering the fruit or extreme conditions. Blossom end rot is another common physiologic disorder caused by a lack of calcium. That's this up here. So everybody's probably seen blossom end rot. It is due to a lack of calcium, but it's not necessarily that the calcium isn't present in your soil. During times of high heat, plants are not transpiring, which means that they're actively taking in water and nutrients into the plant. They're kind of shut down, so they don't lose all their water due to the heat. And because calcium is immobile, which means it can't move from one tissue to another without transpiration occurring, the calcium can get locked out. So that's something you'll see also in times of high heat. Uh, some common fungal diseases. So tomato leaf mold, it's very common. I have pictures of all these on the next slide too. Tomato leaf mold is very common and easily identified by the yellow lesions on the adaxial or top surface and brown spores on the bottom leaf surface. Gray mold, botrytis, is common and can manifest in wounds and on the plant itself. Powdery mildew can manifest in times of low humidity as well as high humidity and appears as a white powdery growth on the leaves. Early blight is also commonly encountered. This appears as circular or angular lesions with dark concentric circles initially forming on the lower, older leaves. So for all the fungal diseases, it's imperative that you decrease the humidity. You need to prune your plants if they're planted too close together. If they're, really, really thick, you have to allow for airflow, and that's kind of prevention's the best way for funguses. You can certainly treat them, but prevention, I think, goes a lot further. So here we have some images of the fungal diseases. The top two pictures are of tomato leaf mold. The picture on the left is the top surface of the leaf. You'll see the yellow lesions, and on the bottom you can see the brown spores. Early blights on the bottom left, you can see the damage there, and powdery mildew is on the bottom right. You can see the powdery buildup on the leaves. And lastly, I'm going to talk about some tomato pests. So in our area, the most commonly encountered insects would be flea beetles, hornworms, stink bugs, cutworms, and aphids. So this image here, top right, that's indicative of flea beetle damage. Hornworms, it's a picture of a hornworm down there, if you've ever seen them on your crop. Stink bugs, the picture with the tomato and the hole, that's stink bug feeding damage. Cutworms and aphids are at the bottom left. These are pretty ubiquitous. They're all relatively easily treated. Stink bugs and flea beetles can be treated with spinosad. The hornworms can be treated with BT. And aphids, any kind of insecticidal soap or even a neem oil. It doesn't take anything very harsh to get rid of aphids, but they're pretty common. If you see anything, it's probably going to be one of these guys. So that is my funding agencies, and this is my contact information. Do we have any questions?
Thanks, Zach. Does anybody have any questions? You can unmute yourself or type them in the chat. Okay, well, if anybody doesn't have any questions, if you would like this PowerPoint emailed to you with some of this information, you can leave your email in the chat box, and I can get that to you. But if there's no other questions, then we'll go ahead and jump off. Thank you, Zach.
Thanks.